matter. It's not going to be that simple, but isn't it 90% of the world's populace, Clif, lives on the coast or very close to the ocean?
Yeah, within 30 miles, you get 85% of the planet's populace. But even beyond that, of course, you get almost all the nuclear plants. You get all of the port systems. You get all of the communication sites, and just on and on and on. So
it doesn't have to be a mile and a half tsunami.
No. And some of the literature, some of the ancient literature that has come through, suggests that this movement is done in a series of fits and starts, little jerks. And this makes sense relative to what's actually going on and how the angular momentum of the planet would attempt to reassert itself under these conditions, and that the bulge being gone would not be a smooth, continuous process. And so even if you were going to shift a great degree, say that the continents were going to spin 3,000 kilometers, as Patrick suggests, well, even under those conditions, it might do it in 3 separate jumps. In which case, that perhaps it would be, as you say, locally devastating, which maybe it's going to come in, 100 miles, 200 miles along the coast, and we're going to have huge levels of destruction at that level. Effectively, our civilization is shot because of the...
Oh, that would take care of it, sure.
Yeah, and really, the terrible part of this is that much of the civilization may be really at risk from the precursors long before we actually get to such an event, because bear in mind, certain things are predictable. As I was saying, the internal magnetics of the planet are going to get really weird. And so we're going to see, as a noticeable or predictable precursor to this, we would see the poles melt while the temperate zones become colder and have a lot of freezing. So it'd be kind of like, a hair on a naturally occurring bald guy like myself. So there's a little ring of hair around the ears. We're going to have snow around the temperate zone. It may get quite severe at the same time that the Arctic Circle area may just be totally ice-free. This will have to do with those...
Which has happened before, we know. Yeah.
Correct. And actually, I think Charles Hapgood cites it both in Path of the Poles and the...
right, I think he does.
The maps of the ancient Sea King.
Well, there's trees, everything else down there. I mean, it was obviously green and lush and quite vibrant as a non-ice mass at one time. When and how. I want to, again, call attention to the special material for tonight's program, available through the guest box at my site, rense.com or halfpasthuman.com. Beautifully done. I don't know who did it.
Rebecca Price did all of the graphics for us. That's why we had to wait, was basically we couldn't get my crude graphics to get anything close to the idea, so we had to get a professional involved.
Rebecca, you did a beautiful, brilliant job.
She translated all these very well. I'm very pleased.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, and we will... keep that up in a featured story, along with tonight's audio for free for a long time. I'm looking at some of these drawings again and again and just amazed. She is really gifted. That's good. Very good stuff. Okay, so we have 1,000 days, maybe less. Who knows?
The problem is that this is a predictable sequence if you have certain levels of knowledge ahead of time, which has been deprived from us. The powers that be may know it through the Vatican at all, but us as the regular humans, we don't.
Well, that's why I'm looking at Denver as a locus, and there's a lot of weirdness there, and anybody can be there in 2.5 hours, and that's all.
Yeah, and it's one of these genetic kind of things. I've done spelunking. I have no problem with it. I can handle claustrophobia and that kind of stuff, but I'm a small boat kind of guy, so that's what my approach is going to be.
Now, that's a thought. Okay, so somebody's got a boat. It's a stable boat. It's not some sleek sailing yacht. What's the plan? What would the plan be? To cast off? You've got notice. You've got 10 hours. You've got a couple days.
You may have months. You may actually have months. What if we're correct and the ice gives way, say about 6 months on the pole, 6 months before the event occurs? Okay. Well, then we're going to get a huge level of water raise, maybe as much as 50 or 60 feet, even though ultimately it might be 300 feet. It takes a long time to propagate around the planet, but you'd get that initial 50 or 60-foot tidal range shift, and so you'd know that might occur 6 months beforehand. And you'd have satellites going wonky, everything's strange on the planet.
I think they'd all be toast. So you take off in your boat, you go out, 1,000 miles, 500 miles, and then you end up stuck in Iowa City, Iowa, when the waters recede?
Well, maybe when you see the Rockies, follow Bugs Bunny's advice and hang a left.
I would say. All right, hang on, gang. We'll be right back. Okay. Lots of things here. Noah's Ark.
Well, it goes even into the Vedic literature. That's you find the water myths everywhere, and if you look at a lot of the Sanskrit stuff, which in my opinion has to be one of the oldest languages around, just based on complexity.
Yeah.
The Vedic myths, the pre-Vedic myths actually talk about this fellow by the name of Manu, who saved the woman who knew the name and uses of all of the plants. And it was from their education that the civilization was able to restart.
Mm-hmm.
And I like their particular myth because Manu is a small boat guy, no giant ark or anything, just him and this woman and their food and so on. And he was told about it by interaction with sea life. And basically he was a fisherman who knew the sea intimately, and because he knew it intimately, he knew things weren't quite right, and he started getting ready. And when all this happened, they were out in the boat. And there's some other information within that myth structure and some of the writing that goes very specifically and could be almost a log entry in terms of how this thing could play out.
All right. So if you're out at sea, you don't
there's
necessarily
very different strategies. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't necessarily get thrown on the land. You just kind of rise up and you rise back down, or you settle back down.
Yeah, there's other issues. There's going to be huge amounts of debris, because all of our civilization is going to be crumbled up and washed away. There's going to be volcanoes blowing up under your butt, that kind of thing.
Not
it's going to be like something out of a horror movie in many regards.
It's a real dice roll, folks. Now,
exactly.
The Vatican built the world's largest infrared observatory out somewhere in the desert of Arizona. You remember that town 10, 15 years ago? People were asking, why they build infrared? What are they looking at? And we hear stories that they're looking at the sun. Looking at the sun, not just a Soho thing. They're looking at the sun, looking for heat signatures, looking for changes. Maybe they're studying the windings you've been talking about. I don't know.
Correct. And actually, if you know how to look at it, and here's something else. How did the Mayans know, and the Egyptians and these other people know about the polar spin? But they also know about these three other what are known as heartbeats within the sun in the Vedic tradition: the 22-day, a 25-day, and an internal 37-day cycle. And indeed, some of these things may show up as distortions within the infrared bands. And so it's kind of looking at that in order to be able to see the levels of stress within the magnetic field as a side effect of it.
All right. So I guess the film 2012 is coming out soon. Maybe it's out already. I don't know. Another Hollywood disaster pick.
Who, of course, when they made it, they went and consulted Patrick Garrell. Because
that's what I was getting at. Now, another disaster flick, but they did talk to somebody whose website is obviously going to become very popular very soon. Yeah. We hope this program and your work, which I'm sure you will continue adding to, does as well. We'll update it as needed. This is going to be, boy, talk about a society that's drowning in anxiety already.
Yeah.
The 2012 drum beat is, you can hear it already. People have already put out how many books? Over 150 books already. Just nominal books, but there are going to be lots of things. The potential to manipulate people has never been greater or more easily achieved with the media. And I don't even begin to know how to tell people what to do. We talked, should we say anything about this? The feds would never tell us.
No, but I'm quite convinced that if you read both Cottrell and Morris's Cottrell's book, and then especially the Mayan prophecies, and then you read Garrell's book, you become aware of the mathematics. The mathematics is very straightforward once you grasp the way it
now,
works.
Now, when you say that, excuse me, but when you say mathematics don't lie, okay, we know that it's the voice of the universe. We know that too. How easy is it to understand the math? Now, you're a brilliant man. I mean, you
can leave a lot of the confusing numbers out. What you care about are the basic concepts, that the sun's equator spins faster than the poles, and that this causes a distortion and a tweaking of the magnetic.
Which is shown in those wonderful drawings, okay.
Yeah, and basically you needn't care about the numbers much more than the difference between the 25-day rotation and the 37-day rotation, producing an extra lap every 87 days. And then if you really wanted to calculate it out down to a specific level and follow it along, Carroll provides all the numbers you need, and you get yourself a calculator, and you find out that all of the numbers he provides in his book are extremely accurate. And the same thing is true of Cottrell. Now, here's the issue. These numbers are extremely precise down to the 10,000th part, out 5 points beyond the decimal point.
Gee.
Okay, so how did the Mayans know this without these calculators? How did the Egyptians know them, and so on? And the fact that they went to such a great degree of trouble to encode very specific numbers that have these interesting little repeating patterns and cannot be mistaken for any other number, and they encoded them repeatedly within their systems, kept pointing back to this same event. And if you eliminate the religious bent from Cottrell's work and just look at what he's describing and then take his interpretation off of it and continue to look at it in Garrell's fashion, you see precisely where Garrell says that these people were trying to tell us that this stuff can be calculated down to the day because it is a physical process every bit as real as the astronomy involved in predicting where the sun will arise on a specific day. Once you know the precession of the equinox, you can calculate that, on the first day of spring, the sun will be here. On the first day of fall, it'll be there, etc. And in between, it'll rise this high. You can do it predictably and thus navigate around the planet. We've done it for hundreds of years using the sextants and so on. It's that same level of predictable math that is involved in these sunspot cycles. As long as you get away from the academic view of it all and you look at it in unschooled but very educated eyes. Garrell has spent like 40 years researching his stuff. I've done probably 30 years of reading in the Vedic and the Asian traditions the same numbers without recognizing what I was seeing until I saw the code being explained to me for the Mayan component. And then it's like, well, duh, I should have caught on to that 15 or 20 years ago. But now that I've grasped it, it's rather startling. And basically, if we had 2 more bits of information, we could even predict it down to the hour. But that may not be necessary because the powers that be may be slapping us in the face with it. Well, if you look on the back of your dollar bill, it says Nova Order Seclorum, which does not mean New World Order. It means New Order of the Ages. And one of the predictable effects of this is that the precession gets all wonky. So we think we're going into the age of Aquarius. The sun's going to spin us around, and the earth's going to spin around and heave, and all of a sudden we'll be in the age of Taurus or something based on where we end up. And we start all over again, and the precession gets a little bit stranger. And hopefully this time we'll get it right and come through with enough of the goodies